And we are rolling on February 5th, 2015, examining United States prison policy. And we're about to hear from Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather. And
Hi, Heather.
Hi. And I'll be presenting a proposition to be presented as a policy case in the affirmative. What is the problem that's going on here? Well, in 1972, for every 100,000 adults in the United States, 93 individuals were incarcerated in a state or federal prison, and by 2007, that corresponding number was 506. The United States now incarcerates a higher percentage of its population than any country in the world, and that's from ENDS 2014, the public's increase in attentiveness and the influence of mass incarceration. In California, there is no noticeable rise in violent crime statistically, yet there is an estimated increase of 10,000 inmates over the next 5 years, and that's from St. Page 2014, populations in prisons to increase. Drug possession especially has become a way to throw people into jail. As stated within the 2013 U.S. Sentencing Commission Guidelines Manual, selling of 28 grams of crack cocaine holds marginally less sentence than if one is assaulted by another fellow human being with the intent to kill. And that's from Tonery, from 2014, Remodeling American Sentencing. The overcrowding of prisons has also created extremely negative living conditions for inmates. For example, in 2006, California state prisons reached double their capacity. As a result, this mass overcrowding resulted in gymnasiums filled with cots, prisoners sleeping in stairwells, and most disturbingly, a near total lack of mental health services for these inmates. And that's from Weissmuller, 2015, California's Cruel and Unusual Prisons. How big is the problem? In comparison with other nations around the world, America locks up 5 times the amount than Britain, 9 times the amount than Germany, and about 12 times the amount than Japan. And that's from Rough Justice 2010. Another way to look at America's overflowing incarceration rate is that our inmates take up about a quarter of incarcerated people around the world. That's from Macmillan, 2012, Growing Pains. 1 in 28 American kids have an incarcerated parent. And this is from Stern, 2014, Prison Education and Our Will to Punish. And so this is not only affecting adults, but it's also affecting whole families. Loved ones are being thrown in jail and kids are being left without parents. In California, for instance, it has become so overcrowded that federal courts have actually had to get involved, forcing prisons to lower their prison population. And that's from Wilson, 2014. Prisons in 17 states are over capacity. There's a noticeable disproportion of incarcerated minorities in comparison with their white counterparts. 1 in 3 African American men and 1 in 6 Latino men face imprisonment at some point in their lives, compared to with 1 in 17 white men. And that's Erickson, 2014, Racial Impact Statements. There's a drastic 60% of prisons in the United States are of racial or ethnical minorities. That's from Stern. High recidivism rates also contribute to the issue of overcrowding as well. Each year in the United States, an estimated 700,000 people return to their neighborhoods. 2/3 of those, of all people who are incarcerated in state prisons, are rearrested and half are reincarcerated. That's also from Stern. Why do we have this problem? Well, tough on crime laws enacted during the late 1980s and early 1990s resulted in local, state, and federal prisons becoming highly impacted with an increased incarceration rate. And that's from Nolan, 2015, Jail Overcrowding and Premierial Issue for many counties. The tough on crime law itself has expanded the death penalty and granted states billions of dollars to build more prisons. That's from Ucla, 2014. California is about to decide whether they're sending fewer criminals to prison. With more prisons to fill, this is like an encouragement to incarcerate more of its citizens, restricting them from their freedom and liberty due to petty crimes. The 3 strikes law, especially those in California, makes something as small as petty theft or drug possession turn into a lengthy sentencing. Offenders with 2 or serious or violent priors face 25 years to life for the 3rd. As a result of these 3 strikes laws, California has major issues when it comes to reducing prison population, with the severities of these laws targeting many drug offenders. Mandatory minimum sentencing contributes to overcrowding of prisons as well. With mandatory minimum sentencing, those found with a few grams of crack automatically serve a 5-year sentence, and these are first-time offenders. And that's from Zuckerman 2014, why we should get a little less tough on crime. What is the solution? Like, I want to focus on recidivism. So I want to focus on like rehabilitating these prisoners through the course of education. It's estimated that 2/3 of the people that are incarcerated have less than a 12th grade education, and 8 in 10 had a monthly income below $2,000. These people are living below the poverty line within society, which can be seen as driving factor in motivating them to sell drugs and commit petty theft. The Wall Street Journal reported that Bard College, which offers courses in 6 New York prisons, has lowered its recidivism rate all the way down to 4% through the use of educating their prisoners. As Dr. Michelle Fine states, when there is an active and free college program in prison, the culture of the prison changes. Disciplinary incidents diminish. Men and women take more responsibility for their own past and futures. And that's from Elfin, 2014 Prison Education. This shows that offering an education to prisoners has an overall positive effect that can result in a positive outcome once they return to society. The Department of Policy at UCLA found that $100 million investment in incarceration will prevent about 350 crimes, while that same investment in an education for these prisoners will prevent more than 600 crimes. We have to repeal mandatory minimum sentencing laws that continue to keep a large amount of inmates locked up for very minor drug offenses. The Pew Research Center shows that 60% of the United States believes that we should try to get away from mandatory sentencing when it comes to non-violent drug offenders. We have to repeal the 3 strikes law. People didn't even have to be convicted for drug possession or petty theft. One case out of California talks about how a Mexican immigrant was sentenced to life for taking a written part of the DV exam for his cousin, and his cousin didn't speak English, which is why he didn't take it. And this illustrates how unnecessarily severe these 3 strike laws can truly be. But California is slowly trying to fix this issue. We passed the Proposition 47, which approved this last voting season, which should change the penalties for low theft and drug possession crimes that result from felony convictions and sometimes prison terms for thousands of nonviolent offenders each year. Will the solution work? The RAND Corporation found that inmates who seek the education while in prison have a 43% lower chance of returning to prison. That's 2013 Bidwell, Prison Education, Progress could save money. With states that are paying upwards of $50 billion annually in prison, reducing the amount of inmates by changing the law and policy can save states millions, if not billions of dollars. What are the advantages of my proposal? By repealing or reducing minimum mandatory sentencing laws and getting rid of the 3 strikes law, prison population will be greatly reduced. Minor drug offenders will not have unjustly filled up cells that are reserved for murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. Educational programs are fairly expensive. It's about $1,400 to $1,700 per inmate each year, and can in fact save prisons anywhere from $8,700 to $99,700 annually.
Okay, sum up now. You're way over time.
Okay. On balances, by reducing prison population and repealing unjust laws such as the 3 strikes law and minimum mandatory sentencing, not only are we saving billions of dollars in taxpayer money, but then we can use those remaining funds and put them into programs to rehabilitate our prisons and give them an education. And although this proposal might cost may result in unemployment for many prison staffers and shutting down the prisons themselves, they can also be an economically positive effect on the surrounding area. A woman by the name of Letta Guerrero, living in Altadento, California, believes that prisons surrounding her town have scared away many businessmen for setting up shop within the region. As she says, there's no jobs here, no colleges, just jails.
I now stand open for cross-examination.
Stand open for cross-examination.
What was the total time? 9:08. Okay, so you're about 2 minutes over. Let's start on this side today. Yes, please. Stand up, say your name, ask a big question.
I typed.
Type the question. Good for you.
Okay. Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
in the beginning you were talking about how because there was like an overpopulation, people were in the same cells and it like created violence. Do you think that reducing the amount of people would reduce violence, or do you think more regulation would actually reduce the violence that happens within the jail?
Well, again, I'm hoping that, well, a way of regulating, I would think, would be towards educating prisoners more.
Okay.
And I think in a way that by educating them, I think that reduces crime and reduces their tendency to be violent within prison systems as well. So.
Okay. Yes, please.
Hi. My name's Shelby.
Hi, Shelby.
You had a nice presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
So I liked what you had to say about reducing recidivism rates, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on your implementation. I know you mentioned educating the inmates. However, do you think that what we saw happen in New York, do you think that that would be widespread? And or how long do you think it would take to roll out a process like that over the nation?
Well, I don't know if New York did it mandatory. That's one thing that comes to mind. If maybe these prisoners were voluntarily going into an education program there, I think if it's a mandatory thing, then I guess it has to be voluntary in order to help them. A process of how long that might take if it shows any difference. Yeah, it might not. It might not show the same results that it did in New York. A time frame, I wouldn't exactly know about how long that would take for implementing it into all prisons.
Okay. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Gabe.
Hi, Gabe.
Hi. So you mentioned the whole educating prisoners thing. So what I got from your conclusion was that you were going to use the funds that we would save from the prisoners being kept on, or the extra prisoners that wouldn't be in jail, to use that to fund the education. So how would you go about implementing it at the beginning when there's if you're at first implementing the education things for the prisoners, but you still haven't gone into jail yet?
The amount of funds.
Yeah. So that's the only question I can think of.
Okay.
Just gonna sit down now.
Well,
Taxes, huh?
yeah, it probably would come from taxes. That's how we've been paying for this whole prison thing in the first place, is through taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
So it probably would be through taxes, most likely, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Hussein.
What's your name?
Hussein.
Hussein. Hi, Hussein.
So you mentioned education reform replacing incarceration. Although that may serve the prisoners, do you think that'll fail the prison system's other goal of discouraging crime?
Well, I think that by educating them in a way I think we're opening their minds to a different way of living, and I think in a way that it gives them options for when they do leave, and I think by doing that they're setting examples, and it's going to start to affect crime in a way eventually.
Okay, we'll take two more questions, and we'll go on to the next person. Yes, please.
Hi, that's why, and
Hi, why?
well, I remember that you mentioned that those drug dealers, you said that if you put them in, then somebody is going to replace them. But I'm thinking that beside of lowering the crime, the law should also enforce the justice. So if they do something wrong, then do you think because someone replace them, then we shouldn't put them in a prison, or do we still have to put them in a prison because we want justice? You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. In other words, you do the crime, you do the time.
Pretty much. Well, I think think like a majority of what my brief was focusing on was like minor drug offenses and like petty theft. I wasn't really focusing on, if somebody does murder or rape or they're a pedophile, I think they absolutely deserve to be in jail. But I think on small issues where somebody's maybe selling dope on the street, I don't think they're not causing, they're not causing harm in a way. I don't know. Like they're not. In a way they are. In a way they're not. Yeah.
How do you do that? Okay, one more. Anybody else have a burning question that hasn't been raised yet? It's got to be a burning question that hasn't been brought up. Let's go here.
Hi, I'm Hazy.
Hi, Hazy.
I actually noticed that we used the exact same article
Oh,
for
really?
a different position.
Oh,
so that was
cool.
interesting, but so you used ends 2014,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts about the public's view on the government punitiveness, as he argues? Like he said that the government being so punitive and like incarcerating so many people is because the public want it. Like that's what they expect from it. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think that like the people having these opinions about we should incarcerate a bunch of people. I think it's stemmed from like I guess like these I always think that it kind of like stems from politics. Like a lot of politicians, I think they don't want to. They always say let's incarcerate more people, and I think that in a way it translates to public opinion in a way, and that's why they kind of I don't know.
So you blame the politicians for creating the
I
public
don't like
opinion, huh?
politicians.
Okay. Let me talk about your brief, Heather, and give you some feedback.
Please do.
I felt that you perhaps watched the other students and the feedback and the criticism they got, and you took it to heart. And I think that's wise because you did a much better job in some areas. For example, did you notice that Heather qualified all her sources fully and gave the dates? And that was very good. My only quibble, and it is a quibble, is sometimes I would like you to state the qualifications of the author, a professor or the head of the study, instead of just saying ends in 2014, although that was good. Now, you gave us a overview. You skipped the definitions, which was excellent because there was no controversy there about them, so that was fine. So you picked up time there. I thought that your overview on what the problem is and how big is the problem was somewhat, you could have combined the two and picked up some time there. You said one quote that I would call your attention to was number one, in California there's no noticeable rise in violent crime statistically, yet there's an estimate increase in 10,000 inmates over the next 5 years. Now, you were taking that to mean we shouldn't be locking up so many. Other people could take that to mean, that's why we should. That's why we have no rise in crime. The bad guys are in prison.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
I see that.
So be careful.
Okay.
When you're making these arguments, you need to factor in the idea, and I'll just say it bluntly, but there are people that feel about prisoners the way they feel about animals.
Yeah.
they hear about prison overcrowding, and they go, they're prison. That's the problem. They get TV in prison? What? You know, and things like that. So when you expect, now you're dealing with a highly elite, highly educated, probably fairly liberal audience today in here, but who are, you know, predisposed to care about prison conditions. But if you were delivering this in a community, you might get the arms crossed, and people are going, what's the problem? I don't care. They did bad things, and lock them away. And I don't care. And, you know, so that's a something to consider. Now, on how big the problem is, as I told you before, this shaming America by comparing us to other countries, I don't know how far that goes by comparing us to Germany and so forth. I like your statistic on the 28 American kids having incarcerated parents. That was excellent. And I like the federal court intervention that showed that you were really up on the topic. And you presented the racial dimension to the incarceration problem, which I thought was pretty good. Now, your setup for your education was the high recidivism rate, and so clearly you needed to be able to do something about that to solve the problem if you have such a high recidivism rate. You know, clearly we're not doing much in prison, but just holding them there. Now, so I would have cut that whole section down a lot. Now, secondly, and I'd say this to all of you, try to have your narrative with your prompt be more prominent with your voice. Which brings me to my fourth question. Why do we have this problem? Well, you know, three reasons. Let's start first with this tough on crime that's out there. And just give us this conversational, you know, storytelling as Steve Jobs did, we saw in the first one. And this 3 strikes law, which is crazy. And, you know, goes, and this mandatory minimum, see? But why do we have the problem? You hit all of the right structural elements that are causing the problem. Absolutely. Very good on that. Here's where you were starting to run out of time, was on your solution. And here's where you needed to spend the most time, because this is where you needed to persuade us the most. Now, what a lot of people ask about these so-called educational programs in prison is, what do you educate prisoners to do? Make hubcaps? Make license plates? What do you teach prisoners to do? There needed to be some specifics about what these what the training was training people to do, so people had a better idea of what was going on. I thought the Bard College from the Wall Street Journal, one of my favorite newspapers, was an impressive statistic of recidivism down to 4%. Was very impressive, all the way down to 4%. So that was good. Taking more responsibility, all that sort of thing. And this UCLA Department of Policy found that you get more for your money investing in. The devil is in the details, and you know it's always in, you know, what do you mean? And you left it kind of general and vague. Then you wanted to, so you wanted to do education. You wanted to repeal the mandatory minimum, and for minor drug offenses, and that was good. And you've cited you use the what I call the ad populum fallacy to cite the public opinion saying, oh, the masses want it, so we should do it. Okay. Three strike laws, yes. Although I think that there have been some tweaks to the three strike laws. They aren't quite so bad as they originally were. Will the solution work? Here you really were in overtime. The Rand Corporation was good, a good quote, and it's a good think tank. So it shows you really did your research well on this. And then you skip the disadvantages, and you can do that if you're running out of time. And then you want to do the on balance, and so that was good. So overall, you did a good job. Just make the changes that I suggested. Look up more and make your narrative more apparent, and make it more of a persuasive presentation. But you did a nice job, Heather. Thank you. Okay, we need a negative. I hear Algo, so come to the front, Algo.
Your copy, sir.
Okay, you're taller, so this presents a camera adjustment for me. Now, are you going to stay there? Are you going to step forward occasionally? No, if you are, then I'm really going to have to adjust the camera. No further than the green part, okay? So stay behind the green line. Let me see. All right. Jaspreet Singh will now address the other side of the question that America needs to incarcerate more. Begin, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just like Professor Miller has evidently stated, this proposition is to be presented in the negative, obviously, right? Before that, as a precursor, I'd like to go through some definitions. They're self-explanatory, but rather, they have a double meaning. So, for instance, the Rough Justice article that we have collectively read, the term criminal, it provides a lot of examples that in which way is flexibly and loosely used. A lot of times that can mean that we have a lot of false indictments, but at the same time, that can also mean we hardly have any indictments. So I think that I'll elaborate on as we move forward. The rational actor theory. Again, the article kind of hints on that, but it's basically a criminological theory that refers to a human being's ability to think through and weigh their actions and consequences. But the problem is that is generally not true, as we will further elaborate. So, what is the problem? The problem is America needs to impose more stricter and certain sanctions here, such as jail time, primarily. And one of the overarching dilemmas that we have is we have too many crimes going unnoticed and too many prisoners unpunished. Right?
Good.
Most crimes do not result in an arrest or conviction. We have the very infamous George Zimmerman example. The perpetrator is out and he's freely roaming in our streets, and that can be pretty dangerous for us as well. He was charged with first-degree murder, then he was accused for domestic violence, but yet what did the jury do? Wipe their hands clean of him, right? And then we have the determinant versus the minimum sentencing. So the determinant and minimum sentencing as opposed to indeterminate sentencing. That's a controversy over today's politics. Basically, I propose that there should be same time for the same crime. In 1977, there was laws that passed that pretty much amended this entire system. So we went from determinate sentencing to indeterminate sentencing. Basically, the one caveat was that we depended more on case scenario, and we, on the other side, we failed to recognize the degree of offense. And I think that's pivotal when it comes to indicting criminals and offenders, because we, at the same time, we have to weigh in what the degree of murder was and what their crime was. We cannot just depend on case scenarios entirely, right? And then again, it goes back to the George Zimmerman example, right? I mean, look at the degree of his crime, in a sense. And of course, we can factor in different case scenarios. But ultimately, I think he has to be given some punishment and just not be let out freely, right? That poses a big danger to our society. Then again, it comes down to human beings are assumed to be rational actors, which means that they can and weigh pros and cons before committing a crime. But as we have it, given the crime per capita ratio and the overflowing prison population, as the other side, famously presents as their evidence, but I think that only, concludes that people aren't really rational when it comes to weighing their options, right? As opposed to this, well, in addition to this, there was a study done by the Encyclopedia of Criminology and Criminal Justice. The head of the study mentioned that mostly major crimes, they are driven by selfish reasons, and there is hardly any rationality that's considered when it comes to executing those crimes. The third, why do we have a problem is, well, we do have a lot of middle-income neighborhoods that are concentrated with ex-offenders, probationers, as well as criminals. I think that just, outright, expresses the option that we need to actually incarcerate and throw some criminals into jail, and replacing that probation system to in-house probationing. Well, how big is the problem? As the Rough Justice article states that, basically America is failing to levy certain and stricter punishment, actually, despite its leading position globally. But disregarding its global standing, I think still we need to incarcerate more people. And then, in comparison to Great Britain, for example, is proposing, whereas Great Britain is proposing to replace jail for lesser offenders with community work. I think then that goes back to the threat that imposes on society generally when we have ex-offenders either on house arrest or they're using sort of like an anklet that restricts them, but yet they're still part of a larger group of people, just like us general citizens. So that poses a big threat. Well, why do we have a problem? So that's pretty much the blaming spiel I like to go through. Then again, we have all these different movements. Primarily, it's the prison abolition movement that we have. And there are many nebulous entities that are going after shutting down prisons. However, that is not feasible, given our private prison entities out there. So basically, they're trying to give more weight to humane punishments rather than, well, actually, humane sanctions.
One left.
Humane sanctions, as opposed to inhumane sanctions. Basically, they want to do conditional sentences. That means there, these reverse sentences that are served outside prisons and in the community with restrictions. For example, like I said before, house arrests. Then, why do we have this? How big is the problem? It's because politicians want to be politically correct. When it comes time for votes, they have all this schemes for smart and sentencing. But I think, according to LA Times, there was this resistance to low drug offenders. All offenders, basically, it sums up that they need to go to jail. What is the solution? I'd say incapacitation, rehabilitation, and deterrent. These are the three methods every incarceration serves, generally. I think by incapacitation, obviously, we have the first check mark that offenders are out of the street, they're in jail. That basically leads to public safety. As a whole, then rehabilitation, as opposed to community-based probation systems, we need to have more in-house rehabilitative programs that not only, separates the general citizens, or actually the offenders, from the general society, but also it teaches them to be general or humane citizens to begin with. Then deterrence, ultimately. Just keeping them away for a certain time, I think, just gives them sufficient time to change their behaviors. So basically that leads to deterrence. Okay. And also an experiment conducted by Abrams from the Department of Justice, basically in an information theoretic model using data from a dozen prisons, state and federal. The impact of incarceration to crime aversion was considerably plausible at 8.47 for a year of incarceration. So I think that's a considerable outcome. Will the solution work? This proposed solution of more incarceration is bound to work, and there is a considerable amount of data that prove it. For the exact amount proposed during the survey that was conducted was basically we have this, the willingness to pay. Is the general society willing to pay to be safe? And the answer is yes, according to this survey that was conducted. What are the advantages? Well, we're going to have crime reduction, and we're going to have safer communities by in-house rehabilitative programs. Then we have the economic aspect as well. About 2 companies own the entire private prison system. So basically, they need to make some money as well. So basically, there's sort of like a reciprocal advantage. The government, the lobbyists, in a sense. I mean, although that's very slow, it's not addressed highly, but they're being paid top dollar just to carry out, policies that support incarceration. At the same time, prison systems, they're making more large revenues, actually. According to an experiment, it was found that $1.2 billion in 2010 was made solely by incarcerated people. That was $49 million above the previous year.
Okay, better sum up now, you're over time.
Yeah, so ultimately my proposal is that we should incarcerate more people, although we're doing so on a very high level, globally, comparatively, but we're not doing it sensibly. So we need to change our act sooner or later, and we need to incarcerate those who deserve incarceration.
Okay, thank you. Stay up there for some feedback.
Open for cross-examination.
Before we give cross-examination, let's give one thing you liked about his presentation and one thing he could improve, and then we'll have some cross-examination. Yes, please.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
I liked how you had a lot of evidence for your points. Wasn't much that I thought could be improved.
You were perfect. How could he improve?
Hi, I'm Joe.
Hi, Joe.
I think a lot of the times you're obviously doing an extemporaneous style, more or less, and I think when you couldn't think phrases directly from your mind, you said a lot of "you-knows," but that made it a little bit informal, but in general, as you said, you had a lot of evidence, and so, thank you.
Let's have some questions. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Lala.
Hi, Lala.
Hi, Lala.
How would we be able to pay to house so many more prisoners, and would that burden be upon taxpayers, or where would that money come from?
So I think there's a grand scheme of things. A lot of it very manipulative, and but I think the private prisons, in fact, they're down. I mean, they're readily available to fund more prisons because obviously they're making a lot of money by incarcerating people. So for them, building prisons is not a problem. In fact, I think they advocate for that, i.e. by paying lobbyists, although that's not very openly addressed. But in fact, I think, yeah, down the road, our money definitely is invested in such systems, as is for education and other, public, feats. But ultimately, I think the burden of expenditure rests partly on the government as well as private entities, such as the private prison systems.
Okay, thank you. Question?
Hi, I'm Shireen.
Hi, Shireen.
So you give the example of George Zimmerman as a reason why we should be incarcerating more people, but what about those people that we are imprisoning who, say, have a gram of pot or steal food for their starving children, or things that aren't so bad, but we're still imprisoning them long sentences?
I like to say one of the things I didn't mention, one of the benefits for incarcerating people is having in-house rehabilitative systems, pretty much.
But do you think, like, we need rehabilitative systems for someone who has a gram of pot?
Definitely do. I think in a sense, I mean, not only from personal opinion, but
Wow.
But I do think, I mean, their behavior definitely can be changed. Ultimately, you know, it leads to a plethora of crimes afterwards. And if we show negligence towards that petty crime, I think it's going to lead to more crime ultimately.
Okay, maybe two more questions. Please.
All right. My name's Gabriel.
Hi, Gabriel.
Okay, so do you believe people who, I don't know, let's say commit a crime of passion should be locked up for life or for, I don't know, a determined amount of time? Shouldn't people who commit these types of crime maybe, I don't know, not be locked up?
You mean crimes out of passion?
Yeah, crimes out of passion.
Just because they want to do it?
No, you catch your, I don't know, your wife in bed with another dude or something, like a crime of passion. Do these people deserve to be locked up?
Like the Shawshank Redemption.
You were saying,
or
like, yeah, pretty much. You were saying that these people aren't rationally thinking, so since they're not rationally thinking, shouldn't we be able to treat them first, obviously, with some type of psychological help, and then maybe put them through a judicial system that won't be so punitive on them?
Certainly, I think, you know, that's, I mean, there is like, there's a scale, basically. We have extreme crime, then we have not so extreme, you know, such as that one. Obviously, we're going to have to put them through, you know, psychological surveillance before we can take that ultimate step of incarcerating them. Because I do think that's, you know, a bit severe.
Okay.
Okay, last question, unless there's another burning one somewhere. Burning one over there, let's go here, and then we'll go to the burning one.
Hi, I'm Nick.
Hi,
So
Nick.
You talked a lot about how we didn't incarcerate Zimmerman and that we need to lock up the right people. What are your proposed solutions for that? Like, what would you change as far as like law enforcement? Like, what is the current problem? I didn't get that from your solutions.
From that particular case, you know, I think there's a lot of undertones in our society. Basically, it's the harsh reality. It's an accident, you know. I think we're facing a lot of racial discrimination in a sense. You know, I do it, you know, that may be on a very high scale, but ultimately, I mean, there can be some sanctions given to that guy. You know, ultimately, I mean, there was a life that was lost. You know, regardless of the case scenario. Then again, I mean, too much relies on case scenario. We're not looking at the degree of offense. So I think when that's put into place, we can give out, you know, sanctions more righteously. In a sense.
Burning question over here, yes, please.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
You were talking about when Lala asked you about how you would find funding, etc. You were saying that it would, instead of coming from like government, it would come from private prisons. But like private prisons actually get money per inmate from the state and from the federal government. So wouldn't it just be promoting them to get more people to? Wouldn't it just be beneficial for them instead of for the actual prisoners that they're imprisoning? Because you didn't say that we were going to regulate on who necessarily gets to go. Like, how are you going to distinguish who gets to go and who doesn't, and who are you going to put in private prisons and who are you going to put in? Like, what's the distinction?
That's a question of high caliber.
Oh, yeah.
But I think
that was a burning question.
right, that is one question. But I think yeah. So I mean, there's already a lot of accusations for America, you know, being the most punitive. But I think, of course, it's going to benefit the private prison system. But at the same time, they're doing the general good for the public by incarcerating people. So basically, whoever the social justice system proposes as an offender or a potential, you know, offender, they're more so happily, you know, to build more prisons and to house them there as well. But I think, yeah, it's sort of like a lopsided thing.
They build them cheaper. Whether they do more rehabilitation or just basically house them is the debate. Some of them don't even make a pretense to rehabilitate. They just house them. The prizes don't rehabilitate. They just hold them. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is nothing to do with that. How do they choose who gets to go where?
usually non-violent country club type guys get to go to the private prison. Sometimes you can pay your way to a private prison. I think Martha, what's her face?
Are they nicer or?
Some are.
Like out of the scene of
Sorry.
Good fellow. Okay. Can anybody else have a burning question? Okay, Jasper, let me talk to you. Well, I don't think you believed a word of what you spoke up here, and I think that you were stuck on a side that you didn't believe, but you gave it the old college try. So thank you for that. But I didn't believe you either. But let me try to help you, because what we're trying to learn to do is to oscillate, to learn to take both sides and to walk a couple of steps in the other side's moccasins to see if there's a grain of truth over there. And, you know, I know you still slipped in your little George Zimmerman stuff and all that, but, you know, overall, let me suggest when you watch yourself tonight on YouTube, you're going to see my biggest problem with you was your narrative was just jumbled. You jumped all over the heckin' play. You know, just was here and there, and you repeated it, and then you went back and forth, and you didn't follow the 9 steps coherently and stay on the steps and follow them. And they're set up very logically. What is the problem? How big is the problem? Why do we have the problem? What is the solution? Will it work? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? On balance, should we do it or not? Now, you brought in some interesting ideas that haven't been brought in by other students, and I appreciate that. For example, the rational actor theory. But we didn't get much development on it. There are some that are saying, because you seem to say it, contradict it, and say other times that some of the criminals aren't behaving rationally, and that another way to put it is the masses are asses. They're behaving irrationally, and so this rational theory of criminality is a nice theory for the ivory tower, but where are we going to go with it? And so I didn't see any application either in your policy analysis or anything. Now, what's the problem? You tell me too many crimes go unnoticed, too many criminals go unpunished. And you start with George Zimmerman. Okay, let's talk about George Zimmerman for a minute, okay? This is a fella that was tried and acquitted, right? So if in our system of justice, we respect that. He went through the system and he walked. Just as the cops in Simi Valley that beat up Rodney King went through the system and walked. Just as O.J. Simpson killed his wife and poor Ron, whatever his name was, the waiter, walked. But, you know, our system of justice, they walked. So is George Zimmerman a criminal? Not by the standards of justice that we apply here, by your standard or by the left standard or by the liberals' standard in America or whatever. You know, he's a poster boy for everything else. But nonetheless, you used him as an example of a criminal who went unpunished. I think that there are, if you were going to go after something, it might have been the grand juries and how it's a very corrupt process. And, you know, you can get them to indict a ham sandwich or not indict a ham sandwich if they're very manipulated by the prosecutors. So Here you tell me, though, back to the narrative. You tell me the problem is that too many crimes go unpunished and too many criminals go unpunished. But your evidence is just George Zimmerman, and that's not evidence of that at all. My first point. And then my second point, and then you present under B your determinate sentence. That's not evidence of criminals going unpunished. And so we needed to have evidence here of crimes that are going unpunished, unsolved, and there's good research out there on this. And we talked a little about this when you were talking with me about this, but it wasn't here on your paper. Now, on your how big is the problem, you didn't give me much evidence on how big is the problem. You quoted Rough Justice for Great Britain, and you quoted Rough Justice, which is a little bit of an old article and not an article in America. So it wasn't good evidence on how big the problem is here and now in unsolved crime here and now. We needed that kind of evidence to be in there. Now, why do we have the problem? The causal questions. You talked about the prison abolition movement. Now, that's a novel idea, and I think that's partially true. And so I give you credit for thinking creatively there. I think that is part of why we have the problem, is there's a tendency not to want to punish crime. Oh, let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And the politically correct and that sort of thing is all part of that. But what you didn't get to, and I thought was the best part of your paper was, and I thought you were going to get to it via our public policy god over there, was the way you administer justice in America that would be smarter was when a criminal knows he's going to be locked up for how long, it's for sure for how long, and so there's a, he knows and so there's the deterrent. He knows how long and he can get rehabilitated. So you had this incapacitation, which was good. You get people off the street, and you talked about public safety. Rehabilitation was a little light. Could have had more in that. And deterrence was okay. Will the solution work? I don't know. It was a real jumble of what you were proposing, and I think that came from the class. I think the biggest question was your proposal was vague, to be blunt about it. The advantages to your proposal, yes. Crime reduction and safer communities, yes. Economics, maybe not. I don't know. Decrowding in prisons, maybe not. Maybe we will have to lock up a lot more to be safe. Disadvantages you had, and then you didn't have that last step in the prompt, which was on balance. On balance, which outweighs the other, and what you should do. Give them that last step. Vote for me. Bibliography, like to have seen you done more research. But overall, you got the job done, and you took a very unpopular position, and you had some creative work in there. But and thank you for giving it the old college try, even though you didn't believe a word of it. Thank you. What was the time? 9:52? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's have an affirmative. Could you come forward to the, right there in the green? Yeah, that's good. Managing attention, communicating respect, finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love. Start your speech.
Hi, I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick.
The United States incarcerates too many people. And when I say too many, that's the point where the associated cost of imprisoning people outweighs any benefits. What is the problem? Incarceration rates have been rising in the United States roughly the last 30 plus years. Prisons are becoming burdened with overcrowding, and funding resources are becoming strained, as according to Ryder Ends in 2014. According to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Statistics, national murder rate has been on the decline since the 1980s, with a minimum murder rate of 4.8 per 100,000 people. The reasoning behind this trend, however, is more elusive, as New York Times writer Eric Epholm points out that there could be many causes for this decline. That being said, the main problem is that with prison overcrowding is increased incarceration cost. Freelance writer Tim Stello explained an example in an article that when Governor Schwarzenegger signed a bill that increased funding for prison construction, prisoner population increased, as well as inmate housing costs. Only 2,000 of the nearly 50,000 annual housing costs per inmate was being spent on education or substance abuse treatment programs. It's a shame because those programs may eventually reduce recidivism and reduce crime and incarceration. How big is the problem? According to the Economist article Rough Justice, America's incarceration rate has increased fourfold, creating a prison population of over 2.3 million. This has made the U.S. one of the most punitive countries in the world, and in terms of proportion, every 1 in 100 American adults sits behind bars. For young black men, that rate jumps to 1 in 9, a clear indication of social injustice. Why do we have this problem? The problems of expense and overcrowding are the results of policies enacted by politicians wanting to seem tough on crime, and people believing that longer sentences will actually make the streets safer. In the 1990s, most Americans were in favor of increasing sentencing policies such as mandatory minimum sentencing and three strikes laws. These laws were designed to put away repeat offenders, but it often ended up snaring too many nonviolent criminals in absurdly long and expensive sentences. And that's from political science professor at ASU, Ramirez, in 2013. Former public demand for stricter laws still affects us today, as it created sort of a ratchet effect, where politicians looking to be elected were forced to seem tough on crime, and doing the opposite would be to seem weak and would ruin their chances to run. So what's the solution? The public needs to stop believing longer sentences reduce crime. According to criminologist Richard Rosenfeld at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, increased imprisonment can only explain up to a quarter of the drop in crime since the 1990s, and it was as low as 10% can be explained. More money should go to fighting the social and economic problems that lead to crime. Many Americans now have increased support for attacking the root of the problems, rather than supporting tougher sentencing, according to a series of Gallup polls taken from 1989 to 2004. This would mean especially increasing funding for all levels of education, especially in low socioeconomic areas. Also, funding should go to rehabilitation programs for the incarcerated people, instead of just paying to house and confinement. Will the solution work? Rehabilitation may not be the best option for all criminals, but perhaps most criminals, as most are now being too many nonviolent. Most worst offenders need to be locked up, as they pose a great danger to society and would likely not benefit from rehabilitation programs. There are a large number of incarcerated people, however, who have not committed serious or violent crimes. There are around 3,700 in California alone, due to three strikes laws, according to the Economist article Rough Justice. This huge number of nonviolent criminals could be molded back into functioning members of society through therapy that gets down to the source of the problem. The nature of punishment for nonviolent offenders does not match the nature of their crime. Different punitive measures for them would reduce the overcrowding. It is possible, as New York has been able to reduce its violent crime by 40%, while its incarceration rate, reducing its incarceration rate by 15%. That was in the Economist article as well. What are the advantages to this proposal? Well, the advantage would be that providing education programs in low socioeconomic areas will reduce the crime rate and therefore reduce prison overcrowding and reduce the cost. The advantage for providing more therapy for non-violent criminals is that it will likely they will return to society as productive members. Rehabilitated, reintegrated members of society will be less likely to become repeat offenders as those that did not receive any rehabilitation and just thrown back on the streets. Releasing prisoners deemed no longer a threat to society would be a way to cut costs of housing and reduce prison crowding. And also we need to repeal the laws, 3 strikes and minimum sentencing, as it would increase judges' discretion and make their own judges so that over-sentencing is avoided. What are the disadvantages? There might be initial increase in expenses as punitive infrastructure would need to adjust to having these different facilities. But on balances, the benefits of the proposal clearly outweigh any potential costs to transition the infrastructure, as our system right now is currently failing. And one final statistic to leave with is that California's criminal justice problems have created a $26 billion deficit, money that should not be going to waste locking up so many people. This is from Ryder Stello in 2013, and I now stand open to cross-examination.
Thank you. What was the time? 6:09. Okay, let's start over here. What did you like about his brief?
I thought that you were really organized, and I could follow you really easily. And I thought that you did a good job, and I could hear you, and I thought you had great points. And you reiterated what you felt. I agree.
Okay, let's go here for improvement.
I think you should
Stand up for Jesus.
My name's Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
I think you could just talk, like you said, like a storytelling way. Would have like not caught the attention more, but would have like made the transitions easier. But it was really good. You could follow it really easily. It's just like slowing it down and just like making, when you make your point, like look up and like connect with someone.
Right. Let me just comment there before we go to the crosshatch. You were really zipping along, and you'll see it when you watch yourself tonight on YouTube. And whether this was from nervousness or what, you were just going right along. Nothing got emphasized, including your narrative structure. Why do we have the problem? What's the solution? 1, 2, 3, 4. See, you really fast. So the audience had to kind of get nervous and go along with your frantic pace. Let's go in the middle here for some questions. Here, yes, please.
Hi, I'm Millie.
Hi, Millie.
Hi. So what kind of punishment do you think that individuals with minor crimes deserve?
With minor crimes?
Yeah.
With minor crimes, I'm almost in favor of just a complete rehabilitation program and with completely new facilities that would teach them these rights from wrongs and ways out, as opposed to just locking them up and not knowing, because they might not know why it's wrong. So if you tell them why it's wrong and teach them that it's other ways to do things, then they might that might help a lot and reduce them sitting in bars.
Celestine?
Hi, Celestine.
To support your proposal, you brought up that New York was able to decrease their incarceration rate by 15%. Did they follow the same type of structure that you had for lowering their incarceration? How exactly did they do it?
I'm not exactly sure how they did. The source did not say, but I'm sure that there's back to the ends. There's been multiple factors that have like decreased the crime rates over time. It's that law enforcement technologies have increased as time has gone on, and the baby boomer generation has aged, and so there's less young people on the streets, which statistically have committed more crimes, and there's other factors that go into it. So they're just saying that it is possible.
Yeah. One more question. Let's go. Who hasn't had a question? Let's see. You haven't had a question? Good.
Hi, I'm Heather.
Hi, Heather.
You said that rehab might not be the best for all, but most.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you perhaps put people in rehab that like don't want that type of rehabilitation?
Would you offer like different kinds of rehab?
What do you mean they don't want to?
Like they don't want to, they don't want help.
Oh,
To better themselves.
well, what I meant by is that some people would not be good for those programs is that like the more dangerous criminals that they're gone beyond hope and that they should be deserving punishment by locking them up. But otherwise, for other nonviolence, there wouldn't really be a choice. It's not that they would want to. Of course, they don't want to be punished, but that they would be forced to go to those programs instead of being locked up.
Anyone else have any burning questions? Nick, let me give you some feedback. Biggest feedback is I want you to work on your delivery, your storytelling. Slow down. Even if you have to edit stuff out, even if you have to take a quote or two out, you can still have it in your brief, but not cite everything. You could skip the definitions and just, go for it to slow down and be clear. Second big picture thing, I'd like to see a little bit more research so that you fill out your picture a little better. Now you told us the problem and you quoted the FBI crime statistic and you talked about the murder rate and so forth going down, and then you gave some counter causes which I thought were interesting, and you talked about law enforcement technology improving and drug markets and so forth and baby boomers of age, which you just mentioned, and you quoted a freelance writer and you talked about, and then immediately talked about building more prisons and that they didn't allot enough money for rehabilitation and building the prisons. So what I'm left from that is, I guess, that we're building more prisons is the problem, right? And we're just locking more people up. Is that basically what you were trying to communicate in general is the problem? Is that what you were trying to say? Too many prisons, too many people in prisons. On your how big is the problem, here I think you were a little light. You had just one quote from Rough Justice, which was, 2010, and we could have updated it and had a little more elaboration on that. But you did have a good quote from there, I will say, that did get the social injustice, the 1 in 9 for the young black men, which I thought was good. So that was good. Why do we have the problem? You covered the bases there pretty nicely. So I thought that was covered okay. You caught the basic ideas of the major forces causing the problems, politicians and 3 strikes and so forth. Here on the solutions, though, again, I'm saying this to a lot of people, a little bit fuzzy, a little bit vague, a little bit light here. Could have had some more specificity. You were forced to answer and say, well, I really didn't know what New York did, didn't really know what they're doing exactly, and so would like to have had more specifics for your solution area. The solution will work, yeah, I guess so. Wasn't a great quote on that. The advantages, yeah, you talked about people reintegrated into society, but that was just an assertion there. I didn't see a quote there, but it was just your analysis. I think the disadvantages that you could have mentioned that you missed perhaps is there might be a small increase in crime if we followed your proposal. Maybe. So, and then you did the unbalance, which I appreciate, and you stood open for cross-examination. So overall, you did a pretty good job, just a little light on the research and too quick on the delivery. But overall, you got the job done, Nick. Thank you. If you're negative, are you negative?
I am.
Praise the Lord. Hang on a second. No stapler? Anybody have a stapler?
I do.
Excellent. He's a Boy Scout. He's prepared.
Oh my gosh.
It's excellent. We love Boy Scouts. Thank you. Ooh. See, I got a decision to make. Okay, I guess I'm going to make the decision to change.
Last time it went, it like stopped in the middle.
Yes. Let's not trust this camera. Okay.